Now I'm going to do a discussion of Judaism, and what I want to make clear in here, just as I mentioned in earlier lectures, that when you look at the modern Israel-Palestine conflict, you should not make the Bible as the means in which you're going to kind of understand this conflict. You want to look at modern politics as the main place that you would look to understanding that conflict. I would also argue that for non-Jewish people, in particular Christians, reading the Bible is actually not going to help you understand what Judaism is. It will help you understand ancient Israelite religion, but Judaism really is something that evolves in this period, okay? And that's something that the book sort of explained, but I just want to make that very clear. We get a sense of Judaism in certain aspects of it in the gospel accounts, with the debates that Jesus had with some of the sects of Judaism of the time. But, okay, so how is this? Well, I'm just going to kind of back up and go over some things. As we remember, Alexander and his successors were relatively favorable to Judaism. But there was also the Hellenization process that happened there, and many elements of the Greek origin really became infused in the local Jewish population. There were many Jews that wanted to fit in so much into the Greek elite culture that they didn't like the fact they were circumcised, because males would go work into the gymnasium naked. And if you were Jewish, it was clear right away. Big or small, you got clipped. So what happened is there was this terrible restoration device known as an ephispasm that would put on fake foreskins for some Jews that wanted to look like that they were not circumcised. And so, it's a tragedy. So just to make it clear for those who don't understand this, right? Men are born with a penis with foreskin on the top that goes over it, and there's that general act of cutting off the tip in certain cultures, which Judaism has been one. And so, yes, how this would work in putting on a fake foreskin and what that would entail for the person is probably horrific. But this is the kind of level in which cultural influence is making people feel compelled to want to be like the other. Think about, African Americans putting this really, really heavy burning kind of grease in their hair to kind of comb it and make it like white people hair, so you can see the influence that the Greek culture had. But there was a turning point where also, and I'm not going to be able to go into much details on this, but the Seleucid dynasty, if you remember, we talked about a while back, the Hellenistic dynasty there. Antiochus got involved in basically oppressing Judaism at the time. He wanted to prohibit circumcision, having copies of the Torah, the keeping of the Sabbath. He essentially kind of went on an Jewish campaign, and he erected an altar to Zeus in the Jewish temple at Jerusalem, even sacrificing pigs. We all know that the pigs are unholy to Jews like they are to Muslims. This was an insult, and this led to a rebellion. And so there was a priest, an aged priest that was from the Hasmonean Dynasty, and he led this revolt. He refuses to sacrifice Zeus, kills the commissioner. His leading 5 sons lead a kind of desert guerrilla campaign. And in 165 BCE, his son Judas Maccabees recaptured most of Jerusalem and restores Jewish worship in the temple. And this rededication of the temple to Yahweh is where we get the idea of Hanukkah. Hanukkah, it means rededication. Okay, rededicating the temple. And so celebrating then Jewish independence that would last until 63 BCE. Now this information I don't care if you memorize all of this or know this, but I wanted to kind of put in context a sort of background to where the Jews were at prior to the Romans, okay, which is not really discussed in the text. So you had a dynasty. So we talk about all these different dynasties. The Hasmonean Dynasty was set up an independent dynasty of these like Jewish priestly class that ruled what we think of as Judea, Samaria, okay, or ancient Palestine. But in 130 BCE, the boundaries of Jews were only in Judea, okay, very small. By 100 BCE, they greatly expanded and forced non-Jews to convert to Judaism. Yes, this is true. Judaism is known now as a religion that not only doesn't do forced conversions, but doesn't even encourage proselytizing or converting people to Judaism. But in fact, at this time period, many people in the region were actually forced to convert to Judaism, and many fled into Egypt. Ones, for instance, to worship the god Kos, like a moon god, I believe. Herod the Great, who we're now going to talk about, the Idumeans, was a descendant of a forced convert to Judaism. So here we see the Hasmonean Dynasty acting like we see other dynasties doing, aggressive, expanding borders, doing things that they think that will create their own interest to unify their little kingdom and so on. Okay, and so here's like a picture kind of showing some of the breakup of this area under the Maccabees, and the annexations that would take place of different territories. Okay, now there's a civil war. Jewish leaders fight among themselves for power. In 63 BCE, Roman general Pompey is invited by Judean aristocrats to get involved. He's backed one side of the conflict. Romans are also conflicting with each other over territory. There's a collapsing of the Roman Republic. Just put in context what's going on now. Parthians come in and conquer in 40 BCE. Herod escapes to Rome, and the Senate declares him Jewish king. With the help from Jewish and Roman troops, he reconquered the territory away from the Parthians, and Herod becomes king of the Jews. Okay, that's a lot of information still going in there, but what I wanted to put in context is how does the Romans end up getting involved? Well, we saw the Jews come under the control of the Hellenized dynasties of Syria, the Seleucid dynasty, becoming independent for a very short time, expanding their territories. Then, you don't ask a big empire to come help you involved in your conflict and expect them not to stay. Okay, this happens all the time. Even in modern times, the Lebanese government invited the Syrian government to help them in the civil war, and then the Syrians just stayed and kept their secret police and all this kind of stuff. And this is in modern 20th century. So this happens again and again, where people fighting invite a stronger power to come in, and then they stay and they meddle in the affairs much more so than ever before. So Herod is going to become a puppet king, essentially ruling on behalf of the Romans. Okay, and so we've talked about this kind of relationship before, so just keep in mind. But he is, he's going to have a mixed legacy. So as I mentioned, his mother was Arab Nabatean. He was a forced convert to Judaism, or is a descendant of. So it would make sense that he favored non-Judean Jews, okay, Jews that are on the outside, perhaps other forced converts. He does not support old Jewish sects such as the Pharisees, which we'll learn more about, and the Sadducees. He builds up cities and ports. And what he does also, though, is he transforms Jerusalem and its temple into a thriving center of Jewish worship. The historical record seems to look kinder from a bird's eye view and a long view perspective on him than, let's say, what he's even been viewed by Christians. In the New Testament, it claims that he kills baby boys in Bethlehem. But there's no record. There's no other historical record other than the New Testament of this. So it could be true. or for various reasons, it could not be true. Again, he has a mixed legacy in terms of what he was doing for the Jewish community, and he had a lot of haters, and he had a lot of people who saw him as a great benefit to the area. So I'll stop there and we'll move on to the next part.